Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's committee meeting of Health and Wellbeing Committee on Monday, 29th of July 2024. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Thank you. So, do we start the meeting? Appointment of substitutes. Do we have any appointment of substitutes? No. Thank you, Julian. Any declarations of interest? No? Nice and easy, thank you. Public participation. We do have one speaker this evening, which is Sam Underwood, and he's going to be addressing the committee, and he's a member from Bike Worcester. Sam, if you'd like to come forward, thank you. And if you'd like to use your microphone, you've got 5 minutes and we'll let you know when we're getting close to time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for allowing me to speak this evening. My name is Sam Underwood. I'm a long-standing parish councillor for Powick, where I also chair the climate emergency subgroup called PACE. I sit on the county's Active Travel Stakeholder Forum, and I'm a volunteer rider for 4 of Worcester's bike buses. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Bike Worcester. A year ago, we spoke at this meeting when the Active Travel Action Plan was on the agenda and warned that although the aims and ambitions were bold, the plan itself was unlikely to realise these aims. Bike Worcester was involved in the discussion during the plan's development, but with little impact on the content. As a mitigation, it was agreed that a steering group would meet and the plan would be evolved over the course of the year. So we'd welcome feedback tonight on this process and the changes that were made. It's been disappointing over the last couple of weeks to hear mention in this chamber of the dangers posed by cycling to pedestrians. Yet councillors were largely silent on the actual cause of danger on our roads, motor vehicles and the people driving them. Make no mistake that this is a very real barrier to increasing rates of active travel, and it is essential that our civic leaders acknowledge that we have a huge problem in the city. Unlike some of the discourse in this chamber, this is based on evidence rather than anecdotes. Bike Worcester volunteers have undertaken detailed reviews of the County Council traffic surveys to demonstrate that we have a chronic problem with speeding in the city. And we've also reviewed all city road traffic collision data. Drivers of motor vehicles accounted for 62 serious injuries and fatalities to pedestrians in Worcester in the past 10 years. Only 1 serious injury was recorded and no fatalities in the same time period for a collision between a cyclist and a pedestrian. We now have over 1,000 points on our close pass map. These are submitted by people who are experienced at travelling by bike, yet still feel threatened to such an extent that they take time to submit footage showing illegal driving, which is actioned by West Mercia Police. If experienced cyclists find the city roads threatening, how will we convince people new to using a bike as a mode of transport that this is a safe choice? In recent weeks, we've also had conversations with councillors where the view was expressed that improving infrastructure for city cycling is a county council issue. While this may be true with regard to road changes, we would expect that the city council proposes solutions and changes and demands action from county, alongside doing everything within their own control to make a difference. We wrote to all party leaders ahead of the City Council elections with a long list of suggestions and are available at your convenience to discuss how these might be implemented. To finish on a positive note, the city now has bike buses serving 10 schools, with over 500 bike buses completed over the last year. Hopefully you all watched the video that Rob emailed you, although I realise he sent it quite late in the day, I think. It's a shame that we weren't able to play it here tonight, because, even more excitingly, Worcester will be the host city for the 2025 World Bike Bus Summit. Previous locations have been Barcelona and Frankfurt, and we'd really like councillor and city council support in establishing a bike bus at every Worcester school by the time of the summit next April. Help us to showcase Worcester for the brilliant city it is and its potential to become known as a place where change is possible. Thank you again for your time, though it's hard to offer much in such a short slot. What we want is a conversation. Bike Worcester volunteers are the experts in travelling around the city by bike. Please use us as your resource, and let's have a real crack at meeting the aims of the action plan by enabling and encouraging more cycling and walking, improving the city for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Underwood. I'm sure officers will reply to you in due course. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the debate.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Chair, can I just apologise to Mr Underwood for my phone going off twice?
It
was not deliberate, honest. Sorry.
Right, if we can go to the minutes of the last meeting, which were held on the 10th of June, if we can go through them page by page. Page 1, any queries? Page 2. Page 3. Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. Matter arising. It says on page 3 that information can be provided via a briefing note regarding the uptake of home support funding. If I've got the acronym correct, HSF funding. I wonder whether the briefing note that has been made as a suggestion could actually be provided quite far in advance of the next Health and Wellbeing Committee meeting, if possible, given that the funding is due to run out on the 30th of September. So is that a request that can be followed through on? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lawrenson. We have provided information on uptake as part of the performance report this evening, and we'll continue to do that. But again, if members wish to have a separate briefing note on that particular topic, we can provide that and do that in advance of committee.
Yeah, I think what it relates to is the funding that's been sent for the household support fund that's gone to various organisations. I think what we're trying to understand is how many people have actually been impacted by receiving those funds, as opposed to just a general pot going. I think the concern is this money is going to end in September. So I think as a council we need to know, are we in for a sudden influx of problems in a case because that funding has been stopped? So I think we need to know how we're going to be affected come September.
Chair, can I suggest if that's the brief of the paper, that's probably more committee paper, not a briefing paper. I'm happy to be steered by you, but I think if there are any implications from it, then that would be something that would need to be debated in a wider committee setting. But if a briefing paper first of all is what is sought, we can provide that.
Any question, input? Councillor Lawrence, any comeback?
Yeah, sorry. I apologise, my question wasn't as specific as it should have been. I mean, what I meant to ask is what you've just asked about, where exactly that money has gone. I'm just, seeing the minutes and remembering the offer that was made. Yes, I get that later in the agenda we're going to look at the performance management report and the fund is mentioned, but is that level of detail and exactly where the money's gone and the number of people who've been affected, but in more detail. And I apologise if that's creating more work for officers, but I do think that offer, well, it's clearly a sincere offer and it said we can provide it, and I'm asking, can it be provided soon, because that funding is going to run out and we don't want that to happen and then us ask questions in October saying, oh, we should have said more. So
are we happy then to go with just a note to begin with, do we think, Councillor? Any other questions at all? No? Okay, so moving on to item number 5, Q1 performance report, and that's over to you, Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first scorecard report for this civic year. New members may not be sort of used to the format, but we report back on the key projects relating to the committee, and then we go through the key performance indicators relating to the committee as well. In respect of the project, there are 3 on there, 2 of which are the focus of agenda items this evening, so I won't go into any detail on those. And the third one relates to the delivery of grants to support the impact of the cost of living crisis. We've just discussed that as well, and we'll provide a briefing note on that one. But as I said, there's also some detail within the KPIs relating to those 2 items as well. There are several key performance indicators. A small number are green, and the majority are red. There's narrative against each of those. Just having sort of reviewed them today, there's still a bit of work, I think, to define or to better define some of them. And the red indicators that relate to Household Support Fund and DWAS. I believe that's an impact of the funding coming through late. We didn't get notification of the funding until April. And you remember we had to use Managing Director urgency powers on how we were going to spend that. So I would expect to see a much better uptick in Q2. But happy to do my best with any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Lloyd. Any questions at all? Councillor Denham.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, a question and kind of observation. So, with regard to the expenditure on the delivery of grants within the Household Support Fund that we've got on page 19, I mean, that does give some information, not exactly how many people were helped. I mean, looking at the contribution to housing costs, that's a modest sum, and if it's only helped one household avoid homelessness, that is huge value for money, and that's before you kind of count in, you know, the trauma and the impact of homelessness on any individual. Am I right in thinking, I'm kind of remembering that, yes, concern that the Household Support Fund has only been given by government for 6 months, but we have put other funding aside, which is DWAS and UK SPF money. Could you just kind of confirm that, Lloyd?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Denham, you're absolutely correct. We sort of topped up what we were expecting to be a shortfall from household support funding with those two funding pots. So we have covered that eventuality if it did occur.
Any further questions? Oh, Councillor Udall.
Yeah, just a quick one on page 17 towards page 11. I can never work out the difference. On the issue of exercise by prescription referrals, we're still not meeting, or I'll rephrase that, they are still not meeting the target, even though there's been a major increase recently. Have we got full cooperation from GP practices across the city to enable this to happen? Is there any reluctance to support this? And is there any possibility of widening it out to a wider group of people who can actually do the prescribing?
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Udall has picked up on, there is an uptick in performance. That was the indicator that I was referring to in terms of definition. We shouldn't refer to type 2 diabetes unlocked. It's not that project anymore. It's a general exercise by prescription project, so we'll take care of that. But no, the primary care network are fully on board, not just GPs, but the wider health setting staff as well. I'm not too sure yet whether social prescribers are involved, but I can check that and come back to committee members just to confirm.
Councillor Udall, do you want to come back or say?
It's just not long ago when I went to my own GP and asked for help in this area, I was told it's quite simple, you've got to eat less and exercise more, which was not the response which I was seeking. I was seeking a better response than that, and it made me go away more depressed than anything else, that kind of that response. So I'm just worried that not every GP is signed up to this idea and this notion, and that we need to get through to some of the more difficult areas within the general practice in Worcester who are not fully prescribed to social prescriptions.
So just based on that feedback then, Chair, what I will do, I'll ask officers to discuss with the primary care network as to what the sort of, what the route in is and what the route into that prescription is, and just clarify that with all members so everybody's aware.
Thank you. And I think from my own understanding as well, some GP practices, depending on which location, go straight to on-side, and then some are going to the primary care network. So I think it would be really useful, because I think it's changed. Yeah, I think I do actually have that information, but not with me at the moment. So that would be useful to pass on to, because it does change quite frequently, doesn't it? Okay, thank you. Councillor Cochrane.
I can update you on that. So Onside used to provide the wellbeing services for the primary care network, but that contract has gone back into the primary care network itself. So the primary care network runs those services itself now, but previously it was Onside.
Thank you. Any other questions at all? Any observations? No? Okay, let's move. Sorry, Councillor Zenner.
In here, and the summer quest, which is part of the Best Start for Life subgroup, just kind of a plea for some extra publicity for that, really, because I've only just been aware that it's there, and free activities. The school summer holidays are really long, and it's a different offer, yes, go and see the penguins, but I just kind of a plea for a bit more publicity and a bit more of a launch around that potentially.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm aware that some comms have gone up, but again, I will check in with the comms team. It's probably the first real deliverable of the district collaborative. It's also got us talking about our brand and how we communicate. We've sort of been reliant on individual partners to communicate this. We've tried to join up, but there's definitely something to think about if we as a district collaborative will do more of this moving forward. But I'll certainly check in with our own comms team as to what more we can do.
Any other further questions at all? So, okay, are we happy to move to the recommendation that the Health and Wellbeing Committee notes the Council's Q1 performance for 2024-2025? Yeah, I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, we're moving on to item number 6, progress update on the delivery of the Active Travel Action Plan, and that's over to David.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. This is the 6-monthly update on the Active Travel Plan, which our public speaker spoke on earlier this evening. So it's a report for noting, and there's a summary of the internal and external actions within the report, and I'll pick out a few of those highlights, and I'm so happy to take questions on the more detailed report, which is in an action-by-action update in the appendix. So we take you to section 4 of the report. Our internal actions, the plan's internally and externally focused. On our internal actions, we've now embedded a sustainability newsletter for members, which includes a good deal of information around active travel. And a staff sustainability newsletter has been added to that since March of this year. So some key projects around that, regular updates promoting active travel for staff. We had National Walking Month fairly recently, and the bike share scheme staff trial. So I'll talk a little bit more about the Beryl scheme further in the report, but that was trialled by staff back in March and April. So we've had a staff active travel themed engagement week, promoting Cycle to Work scheme, which has good take up, the shift scheme and Beryl bikes through staff communications. And we've also launched sustainable travel resources on our SharePoint page for staff, which includes route information for staff, how you can travel actively between city council sites. Some of those routes are quite complex, but there are some really good routes that may not be that well known to move between the depot and the museum and art gallery and here at the Guildhall and the Commandery. The shift scheme, we adopted that back in September 2022. Locally promoted initiative, something that was brought to us by a member of Bike Worcester, and it incentivises staff to travel actively, so to cycle or to walk to work on their commute or for business travel, and record those kilometres travelled, and the council makes a small donation to the Mayor's charity based on that mileage. and that's been expanded to include elected members and also walking and wheeling more recently. So up to June of this year, there are 23 users of the scheme. They've travelled nearly 3,500 kilometres and raised just under £100, which has gone towards the Mayor's charities. So that's been actively used. And Becky Hocknall's our active travel lead, who is with us this evening, also sends out an email to each member of staff each month on their achievements, which sort of helps to keep momentum going, and we're continuing to promote that. And we ran a competition as well internally, and also ran an active travel week. So that's going quite well. During the active travel week, a tonne of carbon was saved from being emitted. Sorry, a year-long competition that was. It was a tonne, over 1,000 kilograms of carbon was saved by staff travelling actively. Then looking externally, where the council's both looking to influence and directly, and also lead the way and be a community leader. Our webpage on the council's website is now live. That has key information about this plan, about local cycling and walking groups, and a cycle parking map. And we're developing a bench location map, which is something we've been talking to a number of members about for some time, which enables people who may not be able to walk for long distances to be able to walk and plan and sit and rest so they can plan their journey. Active travel is now fully embedded in our sustainability communications plan, on our Facebook page and Instagram page. And engaging with communities and events, a lot of activity will be related to the Worcester Show this year, as always, but really looking how we can make that show more sustainable, and encourage people to travel actively to the Worcester Show. There are some really good routes to get you to the site. We've been engaging with schools on travel to school. That's a fairly large task given the number of schools that are in the city. We purchased a set of high-vis vests which we've loaned out to schools to enable them to get things moving and start their bike bus fairly easily without having to buy resources. We've been supporting the bike bus, and you'll know that the council has given a grant to support that. And Becky's been talking to a small number of schools about the Mode Shift Star scheme and looking to promote that. So our partnership working, back in May 2023, the County Council set up an active travel stakeholder group. We've been participating in that, talking about local infrastructure improvements, the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. And as part of that stakeholder group, some subgroups have been set up. We've hosted one here, which has been a fairly small subgroup. We've had a couple of meetings, but we've met with Bike Worcester, and the university have attended the more recent meeting of that. Would encourage members, anybody viewing the committee tonight, if you're part of a group that would like to be engaged in that discussion around active travel in the city, and particularly around some issues of accessibility, we would be really keen to engage with some more groups on that. So please come forward to your local councillor or bring those to myself and the team. And that subgroup is intended to report back up to the County Council group, and will also feed into our member steering group on the active travel plan. I mentioned the LC Whip. That's a key strategic document. It's a County Council document. We're seeking to engage with that. There have been some workshops with the County Council's consultant. The timeline for delivery of that has been delayed, so the second phase of stakeholder engagement is now planned for early 2025. And we've been informed down to some resourcing issues at the County Council. That's been phased rather than trying to do all the work all at once, and so we can give that sort of due consideration. And we are very engaged as officers in that process, and we'll be talking to members as that progresses. And just to conclude with the Beryl scheme that members will be very aware, launched back in June with 225 bikes in the city. There are over 5,000 users registered now for the app. We are approaching 10,000 rides since the launch, and something like just over 16,000 miles have been ridden. Those are the latest figures. They're going up all the time on the Beryl bikes. So we are very pleased with that. I think Beryl are very pleased with the progress so far. There have been a few issues of vandalism which have created caught some media attention, but been fairly isolated. And we're working with Beryl to increase the number of bays. So we've launched some highway sites. We're working to find some more sites to get the optimum number. 53 was the number in the proposal. I think we're around 40 at the moment. So some more bays will be going in. Some of them are a bit trickier to negotiate with landowners. There are a couple of other parts of the Beryl proposal that we're now working on them with. So a community champions initiative for the scheme, allowing community groups and charities to apply for free and subsidised minutes, and social prescribing, which was mentioned earlier in the meeting. So 500 hours are ring-fenced for social prescribing. Our focus has been on supporting Beryl with the mobilisation of the scheme up to now. But these additional and very important social value elements are very much in our sights from now on. So with that, Chair, I'll conclude that, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much. I think Councillor Udall.
Thank you, Chair. Just 3 very brief questions, if I may. First of all, new sites for Beryl bikes. Obviously, I've suggested two officers in St John's area. I hope they're still progressing well as potential new sites. One of them is owned by the local authority, so hopefully that can come to fruition. And any update on that, I'd be welcome to receive. On the issue of travel to school, I'm aware of at least one very significant primary school in the St John's area which does not allow children to cycle to school. Pitmaston. The consequences of that are significant because bikes are being left outside school and often left in Pitmaston Park and other houses which are adjacent to school. Are we aware of any other schools which are like that in Worcester? And what can we do as a local authority to encourage them to be a bit more relaxed about their attitude and to encourage participation? And finally, something which I want to congratulate a local business for, Tabitha, Beauty by Tabitha in St John's, not an establishment I go to very regularly, because obviously that wouldn't be a bad advertisement, but they were going to establish, they've spoken to me about it, cycle racks for their own employees outside their premises, which did occur to make me in the past I've been aware of grants and support which we provided to employers to establish this. Are those grants still available to employers in the city to establish bike racks on their premises and to encourage people to cycle to work? I know we've done the Cycle to Work programme, but obviously if there's nowhere for them to actually safely secure their bike once they get there, that's a problem.
Thank you, Councillor Udall.
Thank you, Councillor. So 3 questions there. The new sites that you recommended, I haven't got the full detail on that, but I'll come back to you on those outside of the meeting, but they're still under consideration, absolutely. So thank you for Pitmaston School. There may be some specific issues around there. We're happy to talk to them and talk to county colleagues about what can be done to enable them to allow cycling to school. It sounds as if people are cycling close to the school but not quite getting through the school gates. I haven't heard of that before, so I'm not aware of any other schools where that's an issue. And you're quite right, previously there was a scheme that the County Council ran called Park That Bike, which enabled businesses to apply for grants for cycle racks. It's something that's in our action plan, and the update says quite rightly we haven't identified any suitable funding for that. So it's got a time frame into 2025. It's not something we're progressing as a priority, but something we haven't lost sight of. And if an opportunity comes along, we'd really like to get that scheme going again.
Thank you, Chair, and I think it would be very nice if the Chair of this committee could unveil the new cycle racks at Beauty by Tabitha when they arrive.
Any other questions? Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. We spoke about this at the Active Travel Steering Group, but I just really wanted to get it on public record that we do have a problem in St Nicholas Ward in that we don't have a Beryl bike bay because it got suspended because of unfortunate vandalism. And I know officers are working to replace that bay, and I just want it known that that is happening. So thank you for that. Just one question, really. Can we please acknowledge that thank you to Sam for talking to us at the beginning. He's the complaints we receive about cyclists cycling on pavements, we need to acknowledge why they do that. And that's because they don't feel safe on our roads. And until we start noticing that, we're never going to correct it. So that's just the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Did you want to come back on the...
Just note those.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Kinnersley.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I just wanted to back up the comments of my colleague here about the issues about safety. We heard very eloquently from Sam earlier on, and it's very concerning to hear about the near misses and the accidents, and we've heard recently about councillors coming a cropper, and I sort of feel there's a lack of that acknowledgement in the reports that we're seeing. Now, I know they're not directly under necessarily the control of the City Council, but surely it needs to be there as a barrier, and I feel it'd be good to sort of see a bit more in the reports that we're receiving on the barrier issues. What is it that's stopping people? And I think that safety and the lack of infrastructure will be a big one there. Even if we can't directly affect it, we can be pushing others to be making the changes that need to be made. So that was one point. I just also wanted to make a point about the shift initiative. I hadn't picked this up at the councillor induction, for which apologies. Obviously we get a lot of information then, but I did wonder whether it's worth having the opportunity, because I gather you sort of sign up via Strava or another app, and whether actually at the induction there could be an opportunity to actually do that signing up, and then it's something that it's harder to miss it if there's something there to actually be signed up for, and fully support the idea of there being, you know, sort of targets that we try. Doesn't necessarily have to be linked to a financial reward, just almost sort of a monthly target that we're trying to achieve, just a bit of kind of focus on trying to increase the miles and the kilometres that we do each month or each year or whatever would be great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, come back on those points, Chair. Thank you. Certainly around the sort of feeling of safety and confidence, something we have done is bikeability training for staff. And we had a number of staff have done that and actually felt more confident to cycle after that. So one of the barriers, I think, is people's personal confidence to cycle on the roads. And we would hope to offer that course again and also offer that to members. I think we can do that when there's an opportunity. But you're also quite right that underpinning that is the infrastructure, which really, you know, some of that is far more difficult to resolve. The LCWIP, the local cycling walking infrastructure plan that the county are working on, is really the base strategy document for that. It's a very long-term piece of work, something we're engaged in, that would start to look at that infrastructure. And members will be aware we've actually invested some of our Towns Fund money in a number of routes, but more routes across the city in many other directions would be very welcome, and we'll continue to lobby for that with our colleagues at the County Council. The shift scheme, yes. So the way we run the shift scheme here is through an MS form rather than a Strava app, so you don't need to have Strava or any sport-specific apps. We'll promote that again to members and to staff. We've got 23 people using it, which is a reasonably high number, and I'm sure lots more actually people are travelling actively, but maybe aren't signing up to the scheme. And I think with all these things, we sort of run it for a while and then think about what would be a meaningful target before we set a target at the outset. But a really good point. Thank you.
Councillor Kinnersley.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just to come back on your first point, great to be offering the bikeability training, that's fantastic, but do we need to also be training the car drivers on how to behave around bikes? I'll just put that out there. Thank you.
Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions. The first one's about the local walking and cycling infrastructure plan that David's just mentioned. In Appendix 1, it said that the plan is due to be completed by the 1st of June next year. And if I was a cyclist, which I am, and person who walks, which I am, I'd be a little bit put out by that, because that's a long time to wait for a plan. And then, of course, that's just a plan. We want to see actual infrastructure changes that make it safer to walk and cycle in Worcester. So that's a bit of a preamble / moan in advance of the question, can we bring the second stakeholder event forward so that we're not waiting until early 2025 and so that that plan can be finalised before June next year? Because I think people will be a little bit deflated by the fact that we're going to have to wait another 11 months for that plan to be finalised. So can we bring it forward? And then I've got 2 more questions unrelated to that. Thank you.
The LC Whip is a Highways Authority piece of work that forms part of their required strategic plans. So as far as I'm aware, there's a resource issue, which is why it's been delayed. I suspect it would be a resource that would be required to bring it forward. I can have some further conversations and find out what that resource might be, but it wouldn't normally be something that would be in the remit of this council to fund that piece of work.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, can you still hear me? Yep. So, council cuts strike again, I imagine. So I've got a question on barrel bikes and one on the on contributing to the active travel plan. With the barrel bikes, well, I assume that feedback is still being collated by the council. So would any further feedback about the scheme realistically lead to improvements? And if so, would those improvements be decided upon by officers as and when the feedback comes? Or would any sort of substantial changes to the barrel bike scheme have to be decided here?
I think my answer is it depends, Councillor, on what they are. We have entered into a barrel under contract to deliver a scheme. So they've made proposals within the contract. We really welcome a discussion on what those suggestions might be. And that would really depend where it would sit. I think if we were looking to fundamentally change the scheme in the contract, then it might be a committee policy decision. Some improvements around the operation of the scheme would be a negotiation with Beryl. I think I'd just quite like to engage with that feedback and take it from there, and then I'll be able to give you a much better answer than I have to.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the scheme seems really successful. People are talking about it. They're using the bike. I see them all the time. So it's an amazing idea. Someone praised me for coming up with the idea. I said, this is not my idea. It's someone else's, I think, the chap over there. So, you know, credit where it's due. It's just, clearly improvements could be made. And I wouldn't want residents to think, oh, well, that's it now. Those are where the bikes stay. And if it's not quite connecting A to B as it should, then like it or lump it. So I'm encouraged by what you just said, because there clearly is room for improvement. It's just knowing, you know, where those improvements are actually going to be decided upon. I think it's important for us to know and what the threshold is. Like, if it's a certain improvement, is it decided here? If it's a tiny improvement, is it an officer-led decision? So I think that's important to establish, because otherwise people might become a bit deflated and think, oh, well, if I have any feedback, I can't share it. So if you could look into that, that'd be wonderful. The final one is about the active travel plan. A member of Bike Worcester has given up his time to be here tonight. And in advance of this meeting, I've received a long list of suggestions from Bike Worcester about how the active travel plan could be improved. Are those suggestions going to be looked at meaningfully as part of the active travel stakeholder group or elsewhere? Because I wouldn't want all that work to go into that long list to be disregarded. Are we actually going to discuss them meaningfully?
I'd be very happy to discuss those in the active travel group with the member steering group for the active travel plan. What I would say to members is we've set an action plan for 3 years based on our ambition and our resource and deliverability. It's a small team of less than 1 full-time equivalent, solely focused on active travel. Working with Beryl to mobilise the scheme and contract managing that is a significant piece of work which is bringing huge benefits to active travel to the city. So I'd just like to caution members about expanding the plan 2- and 3-fold based on the resource we're putting into it. Further resource may be required if that ambition is there. But really happy to talk about what we can do and I'm sure members are as well, as what we can do to improve things.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Ramsey?
Well, yeah, I seem to recall that the active travel officer came about because of a budget amendment proposed by the side over here. So would a budget proposal be the way forward in terms of expanding the team? Could it, what I'm saying is, in order to do more, to incorporate Bike Worcester suggestions, we recruit more officers. And if we're going to recruit more officers in a time of austerity, we're going to have to think carefully about how we manage the budget. Would it be a budget proposal that leads to more active travel planning?
I think I might say it depends again, really, on what we wanted to do. My recommended approach would be that we assess our ambitions and work out how best to deliver them. And if that does lead to a budget decision for the council, then I would say that would be the way to go about it from that end, rather than allocating resources without having worked through this strategic plan to deliver those objectives.
I think I would just say it's really early days on barrel bikes just yet. I can appreciate your ambition, but it is really early days, and I can imagine there's quite a few, you know, when we've been meeting on the member steering group to discuss the barrel bikes, you know, there are some teething issues which officers are working really hard, but from the impression that I've got is there's a lot of time is being dedicated towards barrel bikes at the moment and to get the scheme live. So I think it's just a little bit early days to start asking for too much more, because I don't think we've got the evidence just yet for that. Councillor Oodle, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I really like the idea of what Councillor Lawrenson has said, but I think he's talking to the wrong people. I think the people we should be talking to are people up the road at County Hall who've got the hands on the purse strings and are not releasing the resources to do what we should be doing. And I think the shocking statistic for me is, and it may not be accurate because it was a social media exercise which I did. I asked in a survey of residents on my Facebook and Twitter accounts whether they would feel safe cycling through St John's. 89% said no. And that's nothing to do with bikeability. We can have everybody as trained up as best we can. The fact is, it's unsafe to cycle through the streets of St John's and connect to other parts of the city. And connectivity is the biggest issue and the biggest problem I see to succeed in active travel. We've got the wonderful Keepax Bridge being built, but no connectivity to it, which to me is balmy. You know, there's no ability from people in St John's, Downs Green, Albury Road, Comer Road to get there without going on major highways, which are fast running and unsafe for cyclists to use. There needs to be connectivity. And the fact that there's no connectivity on a 7-way to get to the Keepax Bridge is balmy. You know, it's going to just be a muddy track most of the year, and the people will not be able to get to it. So I do think in order to release the funds and talk about the way we need to go, we need to bring the person here to talk to them, to make sure that they understand the reality of the situation and understand how urgent the situation is and how much unanimity there is around this council chamber for something to happen. I think we should invite the cabinet member responsible for highways to this committee and ask them to discuss with us the priorities which we have and to find out from him what kind of priority he believes active travel should be and whether he's going to release the resources to enable that to happen. So if it's helpful, Chair, I would like to invite Mark Bayliss back to the Guildhall so we can have that discussion here in this room at a future meeting of this committee.
Absolutely agree with you, Councillor Oodle. Well said. Thank you. Councillor Kimberley and then Councillor Denham.
I've finally figured out how to work this. Thank you. So I'm going to go with my classic rookie kind of question. I am delighted to see in the report that there is a project mapping the benches in Worcester, and you know that benches are my favourite bit of infrastructure. I've seen some preliminary work actually from Bike Worcester in terms of mapping where benches are in the city, and based on what I've seen, I anticipate that they are going to show some significant gaps on the map, particularly equating to Tolladine and Warndon and a couple of patches on the west side as well. That may or may not be a matter of where Bike Worcester volunteers have mapped, but I suspect that there's probably not very many benches for them to map. I suspect that officers may discover something similar. What I wanted to ask was, presumably there's going to be the work going into preparing a report on where the benches are actually located if a map is going to be made public. Would it be possible to take an early next step and actually note where there are areas of shortage so that we're well prepared to take the next forward step in addressing that need should funding and capacity become available? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's a logical second step. The project at the moment is to map benches so that people can see what facilities are there for them to use, to make sure they can use what's there at the moment, what is there at the moment. But it would seem sensible following on from that. You know, that will show us where there aren't those facilities, and we can have a look at that, see how best to address that.
Councillor Kimberley.
Just to follow up on that, obviously I'm very keen on benches as an important piece of infrastructure for people with disabilities or people with limited mobility. So I think it's really important that we sort of take that forwards. And I was just going to ask when the next opportunity to plug this might come. Thank you.
I think actually, Councillor Kimberley, that'll just probably come into the accessible Worcester, really, I would have thought, wouldn't you?
It depends, Chair, whether or not it's a fundamental part of the active travel project. But either way, we can pick that up somewhere as part of the ongoing agenda. I don't know whether David wants to.
I think we'll do the first piece of work, and then we'll keep members updated as to what the best time frame would be. So we need the data first. Don't we?
Councillor Denham.
Thank you very much. Other people have stolen some of my questions and my enthusiasm for benches. I mean, the discussion absolutely illustrates how important this whole topic is for Worcester City councillors and for our residents. And I absolutely want to put on record, you know, a huge thank you to officers, and Becky in particular, you know, for their energy and enthusiasm in delivering this. You know, when you look at, that's a huge number of action plan projects there, which are green, a couple of yellows, and are being delivered. It's a very limited resource. And it kind of does worry me that, you know, there are too many people saying it's not good enough, it should be something else, and also trying to rewrite history. This is towns fund money that our officers successfully bid for, is my understanding, and it is to deliver what a district council can deliver, and this is Health and Wellbeing Committee, to enable more people to become active and healthier and improve their well-being. Yes, separately, we might want to lobby, we do want to lobby, you know, it's a concern, the level of infrastructure from the county council, but to some extent, I think, you know, that needs to be separate for what is the deliverability within the resources that we have for this action plan, and it is making a difference. Beryl Bikes is early days, and they are a very experienced operator, and I'm sure, you know, there are means for expansion. So well done for everything that's been achieved. And I realise, you know, that I'm saying this as the person, the councillor that sort of shepherded the plan into being and actually received quite a lot of criticism along the way. It would be really nice to celebrate the positives and not to continually criticise people that are doing their job within the resources available. Thank you.
Any further questions at all? I just wanted to add my piece. I actually, you know, the active travel plan, and I just want to say I'm new to this role as chair, so I've come into the party late, but I just want to thank officers. You know, it's been a tremendous amount of work that's gone on with very limited resources. And I also want to just thank, obviously, my colleagues now on the member steering group, you know, Councillor Murray and Councillor Wilmore. We had a really great first member meeting, and I think we can really see a positive direction going forward. And I was just really heartened by that we all seem to be on very much on the same page, really. So I think going forward, it's looking very positive. So yeah, I think it's a great report. I think obviously there's a lot more that we can do, but we are the City Council. It needs to be working with the County Council, and I think the invitation needs to go to the Cabinet Member for Highways, and I think we should formally have that minuted that we would like an invite to be sent out, because we have lots and lots of questions to ask, and we need to know some bit more of a plan what's going on really. So I think everyone's happy with that. So are we happy to go with the recommendation that the committee notes the contents of this report? Okay, thank you. So now we move on to item number 7, accessibility in Worcester, and that's going to be presented by Rich. Sorry, you've had to wait a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. I'm here in lieu of Sian Stroud, who's obviously the key strategic lead on this, but I obviously work in the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion alongside her. It was decided at the last committee meeting that we wanted some member oversight of accessibility in Worcester, and that's the purpose of having this on the agenda, really. So it's to find ways of making Worcester more accessible, looking at our own services, but talking to local pressure groups and support groups, and looking at the barriers that we maybe can't see, but they've got expertise in, and looking at different ways of consulting. This is obviously in addition to our equality duties under the Equalities Act. So really it was to note some of the progress we've already made and some of the planned progress against that. So 3.5 are some of the plans that we'd like to put before the committee. We're in the very early stages, just looking at a baseline at the moment. So we're looking at our own data against some of our partners. We've approached the Health Service, the University and County. So over the summer we'll make some progress, have some initial meetings to discuss some key targets we can all work on there. But this is member-led, using officers and obviously with officers from other organisations across the city as well. We've done some mapping through the census, but this is looking at people with specific needs and different groups of people. So we know this has worked when engaging on cultural issues. So Black History Month's been a great hit, and we're doing that again this year. I was proud to be involved in Eurofest this year, and that approach to really going to the grassroots, getting in with community groups, seems to have worked both in some of the quick wins, but also some of the strategic ways that we operate as a council. So I think we'd like to replicate some of that moving forward. So yeah, I'd like to note the report to the committee, and if there's any specific questions, please do ask. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Rich. And I'm going to open it up for questions. As many of you know, I live and breathe accessibility and disability rights, so this is just up my street. So I don't want to become the Chair's show today. So any questions? Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, I also live and breathe this on account of being actually disabled, so obviously got a vested interest in this one in particular. Yeah, so 3.4 is about a list of things that we've already put into place. Just wondering, with customer services, whether we could do more with reasonable adjustments and or training to help neurodivergent people access face-to-face customer services. Because whilst I'm absolutely flourishing in this environment, and personally, because it's a structured conversation, you put me in a one-to-one, and I'm terrified. And I'm just one of many, many people who would have that trepidation about a face-to-face. So I just wonder whether frontline officers might receive some training in future, for example, Oliver McGowan training, which is mandatory, I believe, for the whole of the NHS, and or reasonable adjustments. So that's for 3.4 customer services. Whilst we've made progress, I'm making a suggestion there. And 3.5 is what we could aim to do in the future. Again, for neurodivergent residents and visitors, I wonder whether we could do more with the city centre to make it more welcoming and comforting for people. You know, because it's a noisy and smelly environment, and that, you know, that's the nature of city centres, I guess, but I do wonder whether we could be a bit more creative in terms of managing the space, making it more welcoming, because it doesn't have to be as it is. We're here to talk about what we might improve. So can we do more with the city centre to make it more welcoming and safe for neurodivergent people? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So your first question is, yes, we are looking at customer service training. So I'm looking at the moment in a completely separate piece of work, but it's all linked in with this as we discuss it as well. So yes, we are looking at that specific piece of training as well. And secondly, yes, city centre, making it more welcoming. I think that's part of the discussion we've already been having with some groups. So, for instance, we've done some work with Site Concern on the St Andrew's Garden project, and there's other pieces of work we can do with different groups on that. We're looking at, certainly for the Victorian Fair, looking at having some quiet spaces there for people who need that kind of get away from the crowd, and I feel very much like you on that. So yeah, there are pieces going on across the council already, but this is about bringing those groups together to have those more in-depth discussions and more detail. So a lot of this we find as we go along and we react to it. So what we want to do is bring people into the conversation so we can plan for it. So yeah, so your first question, yeah, we are definitely looking at training for customer service staff when it comes to neurodiversity and other issues as well.
Yes.
Thank you, that's really encouraging. I think in the absence of making physical changes to the city centre, I think the next best thing is how we manage events like the Victorian Fair, so that's great news. And it seems to be more and more standard these days where events have that quiet space. I think it's becoming more and more difficult for organisations to get away from doing that. So the fact that we're doing that for the Vic Fair is amazing. And I think that's going to be what we do for all of our events. And then maybe in the longer term, we'll make physical changes to the city centre. But I appreciate that's a lot more costly and a lot more effort involved. But yeah, thanks very much, Richard.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Kinnersley next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report. Really enjoyed reading it. The only, and I think it's a great kind of, you say, it's sort of early stages, focusing on kind of assessing where we are now and taking views on board. I did sense there was I felt there was a slight lack of a direction of travel where it's heading to. And I just thought maybe just under section 3.3, just an extra bullet point that in those the first 12 months, there could be something around developing a sense of what a good accessibility looks like in Worcester. What is it we are going to aspire towards? You know, it might be difficult to get there, whatever, but just where we're going with it. Just that's one thing that comes to mind.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, and that's I agree, and that's part of those conversations, getting people together to decide what that is, and also we've got to acknowledge not all the different needs always converge into a nice space. So it's more than having kind of a strap line. It's about accommodating different people with what we've got. But yeah, certainly after the year one, we'll be able to start putting in some more tangible projects. We're just bringing some of the data we've got together, some of the data that some of our partners may have together, and having those conversations at the moment. And obviously, that's going to involve bringing back around professionals and also support groups, carers, etc. So it's a bit of a mixed bag at the moment. But as I said earlier, we found that actually works quite well. And some of those quick wins cross over into more strategic areas we hadn't necessarily thought about. So thanks.
Thank you. I've got a big long list. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I'm really delighted to see that play areas are included in this list of accessible areas that you're looking at. A few comments on that. Regularly, I am in contact with officers to carry out repairs, things like gates that drop or gates that go missing, gates that the springs break, and officers are fantastic at putting in those repairs quite swiftly. I've also got I managed to persuade officers to work with Wandon Parish Council to order a new piece of play equipment. So I'm delighted that that's on order and people are looking forward to seeing that in place. I recently hosted some Japanese guests. They were here as part of a visit from Japan, and they all went out to host families. I had 2 young people staying with me, and we walked them round Wandon villages. And when they saw the play areas, I did notice the comment that one of them made. She said, "It's not very welcoming." She felt that the play, and I was just really interested to hear that because it's not something I had taken on board. So my first question is, are you looking at making areas like that more welcoming to young people? but also something I read about previously was the use of play areas for more mature young people tend to attract boys and exclude girls. Is this something you are working to address? Thank you.
Yep, through you, Chair. So the play area accessibility is addressed quite well in the play strategy that's been consulted on and worked on. But I know officers have received training, certainly in that not all play provision is what you think it might be. So I attended a training session which talked about space for girls. So that's now a conversation that's happening with officers. I'm not in that department or team, so I can't go into any specifics about that. But I know certainly spaces for girls are very different. The wants and needs are very different. The need for security, but to be visible, but for privacy at the same time, which sounds difficult, but when you see some of the models, it's not. So it's not really my remit to discuss that individual project work like that, but I want to say it is certainly something we're looking at, and the wider accessibility in terms of our play areas as well. Yeah.
Thank you. That's encouraging to hear. Thanks.
Thank you. So if I have Councillor Udall next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a few things. First of all, on regulatory, on the taxes for having this mystery shopping. Just to update members that we're also looking at mystery shoppers for disabled customers, as well as people looking for short journeys as well, or sometimes denied assistance from the drivers. I'm conscious there are 2 taxi drivers in the room, and I don't want to cause any offence by suggesting that, but we need to make sure that the rules are applied to. On the issue of dog control orders, I have a little bit of anxiety about those. And I seek assurance about it because I'm aware that a large number of people have assistance dogs who are not necessarily guide dogs, specifically for anxiety or even diabetes, things like that. And even people with learning difficulties have those dogs to assist them. So I'm a little bit concerned about control because it's their own one opportunity to actually go out and enjoy their dogs and have the confidence that they have some freedom with the dog. So I'll seek some assurances about that. When it comes to the city centre, I was ridiculed this about 2 years ago when I complained about the elephants and the trunks being over the top of the plinths and visually impaired people walking into the trunks. I'm pleased to see that's not the case with the penguins, and the plinths are now bigger and wider, so visually impaired people are not likely to be attacked by a penguin in the middle of the high street. But something which does concern me is the continuation on the habit of low-hanging baskets. And I can remember when we walked down New Street with a number of visually impaired people, a number of retail units with low-hanging baskets could have been easily headbutted by people if they weren't careful. So I do seek some support about trying to ensure that those are actually not removed but lifted so they're out of pedestrian way. And finally, something which I'm very pleased about is something about non-verbal signage, which we're looking at in Cribblegate Park, by enabling children with no verbal skills to be able to communicate with their friends, parents and others by simply pointing to things on a sign. It's likely to be happening, I suggested a couple of months ago, and I would sincerely hope that this could be expanded throughout the city. Thank you, Chair.
I leave questions 2 and 3, Chair, to Richard. He's doing a fantastic job. But just to reassure Councillor Udall on question 1, then assistance dogs are exempt from public space protection orders, and our staff would always be pragmatic when dealing with each case, so we judge it on its merits.
It's just a reminder that not all assistance dogs are guide dogs. There's a wide variety of them, and some people sometimes forget that.
Next, Councillor Denham, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I absolutely welcome this report and, extension of the work that's already taken place, and which, a number of our city partners are already very supportive of. I know, you know, the print support from Worcester Bid is about, you know, increasing access, making the city centre as accessible as possible, and what we've done in the past with Access Able and mapping public facilities. So really, really pleased to see this, what has been achieved so far, and to say, and to build on that. Without repeating what anybody else has said, if I can put in a kind of couple of extra pleas, and declare an interest as the chair of Worcester Dementia Action Alliance. So dementia friends training, dementia friendly community. So in the past, Worcester has been a formal dementia friendly community. I know that Age UK can deliver dementia friends training for a very modest fee, and they have done it for a number of businesses in the city centre, and quite small changes, you know, make a huge difference for people living with dementia and their ability to get around. And some of it is about understanding the big thing that I always quote is the escalator up to the post office is really challenging for lots of people. Dark placemats are really challenging for a lot of people living with dementia and other perception things. And proper signing to be able to find the lift at the back. So we after a lot of lobbying, WH Smith did raise their game after we sort of spoke to the managers. So I can put a plea in for dementia friends training, and we have newly designed stickers, so as and when businesses and locations do their dementia friends training and commit to one or two actions to become more dementia friendly, then we can award them a sticker. And kind of related to that, is that Healthwatch have recently done a very extensive consultation and survey around dementia services, dementia advice and so on. And that's quite a comprehensive report of actions. So I don't know whether that's appropriate, whether it's something that this committee might want to look at in future. So just to kind of put that on your agenda and radar. And then finally, you know, we're talking about the city centre and street furniture and so on. At the moment, it's just been launched, is pavement licence consultation. So if I can kind of put a plug out for that, that consultation is open into beginning of September, I think. Yeah, and to encourage people to participate in that and look at that in terms of accessibility, because it is a balance between businesses that want the tables out versus allowing people to move about and to not trip over things. So we need to get that policy correct and in line with this. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for your comments, Councillor Denham. In terms of dementia training, that is actually in our action plan already for frontline staff. So at the moment, our training officer who organises training is looking into options for that. So that's already on that list.
Right, so next on we have Councillor Cochran, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, like others, I'd just like to say that it's really fantastic to have this report and to see this sort of renewed focus and on accessibility specifically, and obviously that's across different departments of the council. So having that sort of coordination to ensure that every area of the council is looking at accessibility is fantastic. And of course, you know, it's not going to be perfect straight away, and it never will be perfect, but it's an ongoing process. So, and I think that's reflected in the report, say, you know, things which we have already done and things which we're aspiring to do. One thing which I think would be really important to correct in the report, though, would be in 3.4 and in the table of actions that the council has already put in place. It mentions web accessibility, and we have a new website, but it has absolutely no accessibility features whatsoever. You only have to compare it to Malvern District Council's website, and you'll see that there's uses exactly the same templates by the look of it. It has exactly the same headings and functionality, except that the accessibility button for the menu of options is missing on our website and is very easy to use on the Malvern District Council website.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't aware of that. I think colleagues may be in the same position, but we'll certainly pick that up ASAP and look into that. And if we need to make improvements, then we certainly will.
Yeah, we have had accessibility functionality on the website previously, and something we subscribed to for a while. Based on some research and feedback, we actually found that what tends to happen is that people with particular needs can very easily download free software to their own machine, which is more useful for them than a more generic package. So I wouldn't comment on what Malvern have got. I'm sure it's very good. We've looked at this previously, so we haven't identified a gap there. We made a deliberate decision around that. But really happy to go back and look at that again based on the fact that you've raised that this evening, and Richard and I will review that and just make sure we're still in the right place with that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Kimberley, I'll come to you in a second. On the issue of the website, I did quite a bit of research, and there are quite a few gaps on there in terms of how people who are visually impaired can access the website. I think as it stands at the moment, there are accessibility issues with it. Going forward, as part of this remit of this report, I'd like to see somebody with British Sign Language doing some audio, representation there, something like that, to be more ambitious. I know funds and costs are difficult, but this is talking about accessibility for people to access services. We're trying as a city council to push people to refer to our website, so therefore we need to make it as inclusive and as accessible as possible. So I think it needs to be looked at quite urgently, really. Councillor Kimberley, thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think you're waiting for too much. I've only got rookie questions, as usual. But I was going to ask the first bit, obviously under EDI, one of the key words there is diversity, and I wanted to ask whether languages, diversity of languages comes in under the purview of this plan. It may not be particularly under this particular remit. But then more pertinently, where do we stand with sign language provision, communities with hearing loss? I was just having a little bit of a glance through the report, and one of my immediate takeaways, and it might be just a subjective thing, I saw there's lots of representation for sight loss, which I think is highly appropriate. That's been really effective by the look of things. Have we had the same success with hearing loss? Have we got groups that we can engage with in the same way on that topic? And finally, because I feel like I've asked you some daft questions, just to wondering if you've got any spoilers you can share on the kinds of groups you're hoping to invite to those mini conferences that I saw mentioned in the report. I'm being very cheeky by asking, but I thought I'd just use the chance. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lemmy. So language is something that I'm looking at this year. So up till now, we had the census back in 2021, and we had the full published results of that in early 2023, and I did a report on that all members should have had, and if they haven't had it, I'll pop another one for your pigeonholes. And it did look at language in the city in terms of residents, and what it suggested was that actually the question that had been asked in the census was being challenged by linguists anyway, because it was, what is your main language, which doesn't necessarily mean what you use at home or what you use at work or with your friends. But the numbers, there was 74 languages spoken in Worcester, but the numbers actually of people using non-English as a foreign language, as their main language, the numbers were quite small, so I think we probably need to just look at those. But myself and Sian are looking more strategically about what languages do we translate into, what documents do we translate. Is it strategic documents? We use it for individual campaigns in some neighbourhoods sometimes. So at the moment, we try and target that. But yeah, it's a question that we're asking, and that's why it's here before this committee, is so that it can have some sight on it, I suppose. So that's my crude answer to your question. So, for instance, you know, elections, for example, we will choose the 7 most spoken languages, which go down to, like, I don't know, 50 speakers. I haven't got the figures in front of me. And we'll choose to translate the really basic stuff for the front of the presiding officer's desk in the polling station, just to say, have you got your ID, or whatever it is that the elections team have decided is really pertinent to ask. So there is that. And your question about BSL, that's again something we need to explore. We need to see, we need to explore what different communities in the city use it, who amongst our partners are trained in it, how have they gone about that, how do they find that. I know from looking at figures from, because I get freedom of information requests about this quite a lot, about how much we spend on translation and interpreting, and it's quite a low number. It's about the £1,000 mark a year. I don't want anyone to take the £1,000 as a given, but having responded to quite a number of them and gone through, and none of them seem to suggest we ever use BSL as a interpreting tool. So yeah, and there are currently plans at the moment to do a self-audit of our hearing equipment across our sites imminently. So that's it's another avenue we need to explore, and that's why we want to have this conversation with you, so you've got some buy into it, and we're speaking to the right people about it as well. Is there another question, sorry?
I think I asked for a spoiler about groups that you might like to invite to the mini conferences, but that might be quite cheeky of me to ask.
We're still working on it. There are groups and support groups around the city and individuals who we'd like to very much involve in this.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions before I rattle on? Okay. Just for my 2 pence worth, if I could, I'm really keen to ensure that when we're going forward on this piece of work, that we look at both how accessible we are as a city council to our customers. And I think that the training, particularly the Oliver McGowan training, is really, really important for those members of staff who are customer facing. But also there should be some kind of training perhaps for those members of staff who are not customer facing directly, perhaps, you know, the street scene. You know, it's so important that they have a knowledge and understanding as to how to engage with someone who has disabilities, long-term health conditions and neurodiverse, because I just think that that's an ambitious plan for a city council. I know it's going to cost money, but I think we need to aim high. And it'll set us out as a city council the fact that we value our staff so much that we think that they should have that kind of training, and I think members of the public will really appreciate that. You know, we've already discussed the website, and you know, I'm really keen for that to make sure it's A1, just absolutely perfect, so we can't get criticised. Councillor Uda's also mentioned communication boards. They are my big thing that I think are so important in a play area to be inclusive. Not only for non-talking children, and when I say non-talking children, that could be those who have disability issues, but also children in the age of 12 months to 2 years who are not talking. It's a communication board. It helps to alleviate frustrations that they can encounter. So we need to look at those. I'm also hoping that we'll start to look at disabled parking. There's 2 criticisms that I have. Is one about the lack of disabled car parking in the city centre that makes the city centre inaccessible for those user groups, but also some of our car parking in relation to our parks. You know, somebody sent me some photographs where the disabled car parking was overgrown and made it inaccessible in a wheelchair. So we just need to have a look at, are we being aware of those issues and are we being proactive? And making sure that we're just very conscious of the community that needs to be able to access areas of Worcester. So we are aiming high, really. But I'm really pleased that this piece of work is coming to this committee. So thank you. And thank you so much to the officer there for answering all my questions. Thank you. So are we happy to go with the recommendation that the committee notes the actions underway to progress the Accessibility in Worcester project? Thank you all very much. And then I think that's any other business. I don't think there is any. So thank you. That's the end of tonight's committee. Thank you all.